Hello everyone, Simon here. Welcome back to our architecture tour of Dishonored. In this video, we are going to visit the Golden Cat. If you remember, the Golden Cat was said to be a brothel. Let's go take a look at it. So here, we start off with a map. You are here to the Distillery District, which is where we came from. And this is the Golden Cat. I mean, just from that drawing, we can already see that the Golden Cat is different from the rest of the city, right? The rest of the city have these pointy roofs. The Golden Cat has these domes. In fact, the more I look at it, the more suspect it looks to me. But I will get into this in detail. What does that look like to you? What does that look like to you? Alright, let's just walk up and take a look at it. I don't think we need to talk about the rest of the city anymore. I think we've seen enough of it. It is run down. There's abandoned apartments. I think there used to be shops down here. Well, there used to be shops down here, but they're all closed. So that's the Golden Cat. Let's focus on the new stuff, right? Oh, also, look at these vehicles on these tracks. Domes. So, who recognizes that style of architecture? Like, what is it? What is it? It's vaguely Byzantine, believe it or not, but it's not actual Byzantine. It's more like a copy, a Western copy of Byzantine influences. Let me just walk around a little bit more. Although you'll notice that the building is presented to us while we walk up to it. So this is a nice view. Look at that. So you can see the whole thing on the screen at the same time, and it's not facing the road, it's facing the camera. Look at that. So the road goes around this way. And buildings usually face the road, right? Like all these buildings face the road. You see how the building line is parallel to the road, and the same on the other side. Whereas this one, the building line is not parallel to the road. So the building is deliberately set back from the road so that you can see the whole thing. So this is probably a video game or a concept art consideration. They want you to see the whole thing. They don't want to have the building pushed up against the road and then you can't see it from the street. So they want to present this to you, and that's fair enough. I mean, you have a nice building. You want the players to see it clearly. We can actually come over here and take a look at the other side of it too. The other side is also interesting. Less interesting, but also interesting. So it looks like that from this side. Oh, again, there's no ground floor windows. Look at that. So it's another fortress. Once again, there's no openings down here. Although this time it's a different kind of fortress. Right? It's a brothel. So in a way, you kind of want privacy. So it's not unreasonable that the brothel would not be open on the ground floor. Alright, so let's talk about Byzantine architecture. This stuff, I was looking at it earlier, Byzantine architecture looks like that. So you see the domes, you see the round shapes, and the domes, and this isn't that from, I think that's from Venice, right? Well, the Venetians and the Byzantines had a close relationship at one point. Look at that. Doesn't that look exactly like the Golden Cat? Well, not exactly, but similar, right? Like you have a central dome, you have pieces around the side, and then you have a longer bit on one side. Look at that. I mean, it's flipped around. But here we have a central dome, we have smaller domes around the sides of it, and then a longer bit on one side. Look at that. Look at that. But what's the problem? Do you know what the problem is? The problem is these are churches. These Byzantine buildings are churches. Whereas the Golden Cat is a brothel. That's the problem. So if the Golden Cat takes its inspiration from Byzantine architecture, then it's misappropriating it because you've turned a building of faith and worship into a building of sex, right? And Orientalism, Orientalist architecture. See, the thing with Orientalism, this is actually wrong. This is Oriental architecture. It's not actually Orientalist architecture. What is Orientalism? Orientalism is this appropriating and exoticizing of Near Eastern culture by the West. So I mean, it's quite natural, right? Like when you have a a distant culture that you don't get to encounter very often, but some explorers go there and they come back with stories. And so your idea of these distant cultures is based on these stories told to you by your explorers. And the way this works is that the stories are often exaggerated or they're exoticized, so they add in fantasy elements into stories, so they're half true and half not. And so then, yeah, and remember this is back in a time before the internet, before people just take pictures of everything and show it on the internet. So before the internet, before even cars and planes. So back then, not very many people traveled, and so people's ideas of foreign lands is based on these stories and not really on reality. And so there's a lot of misappropriating. So what is I guess like things like Arabian Nights, and I mean, and in the modern age, it's become Disney's Aladdin. But like these stories from the East becomes misinterpreted in the West, and this happens in architecture too. Like explorers will come back and describe architectures from other cultures, and then the architects would try to recreate them, or they're like, oh, this is a new idea, this is new interesting architectural shapes, let me remake them. And this is what this is like. And so then the churches, what this looks like is a Byzantine church, but it's been made into a brothel in Dunwall. And this sort of thing happens because the reality of the Byzantine architecture gets mixed up with these fantasies of exoticism. And I mean, it's a bit strange imagine if you turn it around. Imagine if some Middle Eastern country built a cheap copy of a Gothic cathedral and then made that into a brothel. That's super weird, right? That's super weird. But the thing with exoticism is that you're not actually studying other cultures. What you're doing is you're taking bits and pieces from another culture and you're misusing them to fuel your own fantasies. And the fantasies, obviously, a lot of them become entwined with sex, right? And a lot of the Orientalist ideas of the Near East involve harems and a lot of women not wearing a lot of clothes. In fact, one particular example is the death of Sardanapalus is a painting by Eugene Delacroix. So this is like this is Orientalist art. So this is like they drew a sultan who died, and then all his concubines are killed to accompany him in death. I don't know if you can see that clearly in the video. This is Orientalist painting. I mean, it's a European drawing a story told about the Middle East. But that's not what the Middle East really is. Like, first of all, the women are way too white. I mean, why are they so white? So everything is it's not really what the Middle East is like. It's what a Western person fantasizing about the Middle East imagines the Middle East to be like. So this is exoticism and this is Orientalism. And of course, when you're fantasizing, somehow sex becomes a part of the story every single time. And so And so this is the kind of way in which you might, you know, copy someone else's architectural style when building a brothel, because you're mixing one fantasy with another, and then you're just messing everything up. I mean, in hindsight, it is racist. It is racist to copy someone else's church and make it into a brothel. Like, that is not appropriate, right? You can't make someone else's church a brothel like that. But because people are mixing their fantasies together with in an environment of relative ignorance, this is the kind of thing that happens. And if you're interested, you can just look up Orientalism in Wikipedia. And I mean, on the one hand, it's very interesting because there's a lot of kind of there's the influx of new ideas from the foreign cultures mixed with all these wild fantasies. So in that sense, like, it's kind of interesting, but it's also very inappropriate because you're misappropriating other people's culture. So at the same time, interesting, but also racist. Like, it's not really a malign kind of racism. It's not like we hate them and we want to kill them kind of racism. It's more like we just don't understand them, but we're going to use them anyway kind of racism. So it's more an irresponsible kind of racism more than a hateful kind of racism, right? And this is that. And I'm not really saying that the game designers are racist. I think I think they understand. I'm more saying that they're telling us that the culture of Dunwall is a little bit racist, or they are not above appropriating other people's cultures in ways that are highly inappropriate. And that's what this is. Alright, so that's the outside. Let's walk up. And the architecture is interesting, especially imagine you're a person living in Dunwall. You spend your whole life looking at this. This is what you look at. And then suddenly, in one corner of the city, there's that. I mean, it's quite appealing. If you put yourself in the shoes of a person who lives in Dunwall, this is quite appealing, right? I mean, it's highly inappropriate and racist, but it's also really appealing. And the other thing I want to point out is that this is a brothel, and the brothel is one of the most standout, interesting buildings in the city. And what we read from that, or what we interpret from that, is that prostitution is not a thing that they hide. Prostitution is something that they glamorize in this city, which is not quite the same as in the real world. In the real world, brothels, if they are legal, I mean, in a lot of places, prostitution is just not legal. But even where it is legal, it is often frowned upon by the rest of society, and so they would hide. And so brothels do not stand out in most places in the world today. Things might have been different in the past, in various parts of the world, but today brothels are generally low-key and generally not this extravagant. So we must kind of think of this as a culture that's different from us. So we can't use our own norms around paying for sex and prostitution. We can't interpret this setting with our norms. Like, we have to consider this, that like brothels are a big thing, and not only is it a big thing, but they don't hide it, right? They don't hide their brothels. And as we walk inside, we will see that this brothel was built as a brothel and not renovated from something else. And that is important because the fact that you would build a brothel from scratch again talks about or kind of tells us about just how brazen and how not stigmatized prostitution is if you build on from scratch. Because I mean, when's the last time in our world today, in our societies, when's the last time you heard about a brothel being built from scratch specifically as a brothel, right? Like, it doesn't happen very often. Usually it's renovated from other buildings that they can't find other uses for. Like, you would take an apartment block or an old hotel or an old office block and you kind of renovate them into a brothel. because again, it's like sex work is not a thing that is really big and really accepted socially, right? So before we go inside, there's a little gazebo out here, or a little, well, I don't know, it's not really a gazebo, there's no roof. But there is a little seating area up here. This is good. Look at this. So we are raised up above the street. So if you want to look down at the street, you can look down at them. But if you want privacy, you can just step back a little bit and they can't see you. So when you're raised up like this, you have the option of either privacy or publicity. So if you want to, you can lean over and show yourself to people, or if you don't want to, you can just hang back and be private. So just being raised up like this offers you optional privacy, and obviously in the context of a brothel, that is useful. Alright, so there's this outside sitting area. Let's go walk in the front door. In the front door, and it's a lot of red. Look at the redness. Red being a color associated with blood and passion and sex. Oh, and also a bit of gold too. Is it red and gold? Is that the color theme? Very luxurious. I'm just trying to remember the other buildings we've seen so far. Pretty much the most opulent building so far. Or in appearance, it appears to be the most opulent building we have found in the game so far. So again, like, not only is it brazenly prostitution, but there's a lot of money in it, right? Or it appears that they have a lot of money in it. And I don't know if you've been to a brothel in real life. I'm trying to remember. Like, if you think about like strip clubs and brothels and things like that in our world, I mean, sure, there's flashy lights and there's loud music and everything else, but they're not actually rich. Like, actual strip clubs don't make that much money. So the fact that this appears to be making a lot of money, again, suggests that prostitution in this world is different from prostitution in our world. This is more like the fantasy of prostitution as opposed to the reality of prostitution. Like, the reality of prostitution is actually kind of sad. Like, usually people who can't get other work or can't, get paid enough to do other work go into prostitution. And then it's the people who can't get sex any other way then pay for the sex. I mean, it's not necessarily that way, but because our societies frown upon prostitution, it ends up being that way in our societies often. It doesn't have to be that way. I mean, prostitution could just be, if it was a socially accepted thing, then it wouldn't be like that. Like, if people are more open to paying for sex, and people are more open to making money from sex, then it wouldn't just be the most desperate people who go to do this sort of stuff. Then it would just be a normal thing. So that's entirely a social construct as to how we approach prostitution. But we need to think about that when we look at this architecture, right? We have to interpret this architecture to mean that they are more open about prostitution, and prostitution is more accepted in this society than in ours. Alright, let's walk up. This is just the reception, and it appears that there's no ground floor, which is kind of weird. Not sure what that means. Oh, this is the service area. We'll go over to the service area at the end. Alright, a lot of pictures of women, half decently dressed. I mean, some of them are semi-clothed. Alright, semi-clothed, but no actual nudity. Alright, so from the reception we come up here. The second floor, there are fireplaces, so presumably it will be warm enough in winter. We have suggestive statuary, which are a little bit abstract. We have another balcony here. Balconies, I mean, for most people, in most places, balconies are just where you enjoy the outside, enjoy the sun when the sun's out. But when you're talking about a brothel, the balcony has a sort of performative connotation, doesn't it? Like, you might come out to the balcony to show yourself. I mean, if you're half naked and you're out here, you are advertising for the brothel. So balconies on brothels are different, and windows too. Windows and balconies in brothels are different from windows and balconies in your home, for example. I guess it's a bit like your shop. Like a shop window will show off the wares that they're trying to sell, and if a brothel is selling sex, then brothel windows will sell, will advertise sex as well. I mean, that only makes sense, right? So balconies function differently, and I talked about how that is sort of like a balcony there, where you can show yourself if you want, and here there's another balcony. So if they want to try and advertise their services to passerbys, then they would do this on the balcony, right? Alright, let's go back inside. In here, we pass through... Oh, this is interesting. We pass through... It's a bit convoluted, actually. Why are there... I mean, we're not supposed to jump through the window like that. So through that balcony, this is a nothing space. This space doesn't really do anything. I'm not sure what the point is. I mean, it could be that it's just to get people excited. So we have these... Oh, the window grills too. It's This comes from Islamic architecture. Should we talk about this? So I wonder if I can Islamic window screen. Yeah, so these screens, see that's Islamic. The one in the game is not quite Islamic. Look at that. Isn't that cool? So what is the point of these screens? They offer you semi-transparency. So from the inside, you can look out. So the way the screens work is that if it's so that you can look out because it's brighter on the on the outdoors, right? So you can look out quite clearly, but you can't see in. So from the outside, when you try to look in, it looks like this, and it's just dark inside, and you can't see it. But when you're on the inside and you're looking out, because it's brighter on the outside, you can see out. So these window screens, they provide you with semi-transparency. And again, there's this kind of exoticism where like you can kind of see through and you kind of can't see through. And in Orientalist, especially when you kind of combine it with a brothel, it becomes this kind of semi-transparent screen where you might see naked people on the other side, or you might see the silhouette of naked people on the other side, and that's supposed to get you excited about having sex with them. So it becomes this thing. In the actual Islamic world, what happens is that because women, in the stricter interpretations of Islam, women are not supposed to show their face in public. Maybe that doesn't really have anything to do with Islam, more like the Middle Eastern culture thing. Maybe it's not an Islam thing. Anyway, so we know even today there are Middle Eastern countries where women aren't allowed to show their faces in public. And so what the screens allow is that they allow the woman to see out, but the people outside can't see in. And so the woman can maintain their privacy, but they're not entirely cut off. So that's what the screens do. That's what the screens sometimes do in the Middle East. Of course, it's also just a screen. It's also just a beautiful screen that filters out the sunlight so it doesn't get too hot on the inside. So I mean, it can serve a purely utilitarian purpose in filtering sunlight, but there's also the additional possibility that it's used to allow women to maintain their privacy without seeing out. And then to take that and jump another step further, it allows prostitutes to kind of show themselves and to tease the customers as they walk through. So but that's not to suggest that all Islamic screens are either hiding women or allowing prostitutes to tease people. So we need to be careful, like what is real and what is the fantasy. Like the reality is it just screens sunlight and it offers privacy. Like that's the reality of it. How the culture uses it, and then how the Westerners misappropriate that culture is several jumps away from the reality. So I hope we can maintain our we can stay oriented towards what is real and what is fantasy, right? So this is fantasy. Fantasy is when you apply it to an indoor space where it doesn't really make any sense, because if you remember this, it's always to filter sunlight from the outside, right? This is what it's usually for. So when you misappropriate these screens and you put them between two interior spaces, it doesn't do that anymore. All it does is allow courtesans to tease their customers as they walk in. So again, this kind of misappropriating of other people's architectural designs and architectural concepts. Alright, so in here we have a huge open space on the inside of the building with a skylight. Is that a skylight? Or are those artificial lights? Oh, it's not a skylight. Artificial lights. This is extravagant. It's an extravagant use of space. Basically, it's just open space. And this is what I mean when I said this building was designed specifically to be a brothel, because this space doesn't work for anything else. I mean, what possibly... Well, maybe there are a few things. Maybe a restaurant. Like, what building uses would have a big central open space like this? A restaurant might. A nightclub, possibly, but a nightclub, I think, would have a stage somewhere. So, restaurant, what else? But if it's a restaurant, then there needs to be a kitchen, and there's no kitchen here. As we walk around, you'll find that there's no kitchen. So this space is purpose-built to be a brothel, because we can't imagine it being renovated from something else. It can't be an office, because this is a complete waste of space for an office, right? Offices would just have corridors and rooms and offices. It's not an apartment building, it's not an office building, it's not a market, it's not really a restaurant because there's no kitchen. So then after all of that, we have to conclude that it's not renovated from a different use, that it is only specially, purposefully designed to be a brothel. And as we explained earlier, that would be unusual in our societies today, but it would only make sense if this society is willing to pay the money and is socially accepting of brothels, that you would build one from scratch, purpose-built to be a brothel, and also make it this luxurious. Look at this stuff. Gilded columns? I mean, the red stuff is just wallpaper, so I mean, that's not too amazing. But the gilded columns and the metal things and the fancy shapes, a lot of curves too, and obviously curves are suggestive of women's bodies, because women's bodies are supposedly curvy. Not all of them are curvy, but the fantasy of the woman's body is generally curvy, and so the building is full of curves. You notice that there are not a lot of rectangles here. No, everything's curves. Yeah, everything's curves. Alright. So there's a central space. On the side there is a silver room, which is actually a kinky bondage chamber, I believe. Oh, that guy's being electrocuted there. Get wrecked. So we have a kinky bondage room, because again, like, everything is just... This is fantasies. It's just exoticism and sex fantasies. More balconies. Although this one is not open to the public, so you wouldn't advertise yourself here. This is literally just a balcony for you to enjoy the sun. And maybe have sex outdoors, if you're into it. And then the next room. Fancy bed. Oh, there's a courtesan. She's not feeling well right now. So more paintings of semi-dressed people, and there's music. Can I turn it off? Okay, I can turn it off. Let's turn it off. Sexy music, and a large bed. You know what happens on the bed. I don't need to explain the bed to you. And then also a private balcony, just in case you want to be outdoors for whatever reason. So, I mean, look, the bedrooms, they make sense for a brothel, right? We know what happens on the bed in a brothel. Sex happens on the bed in a brothel. The large open space in the middle, I mean, what would happen here? You might, I mean, the ladies might be gathered here, and you might browse the ladies and pick one. Or it might be a large space for group activity. That's possible. Because look, I mean, there's a lot of chairs here. Like they might just hang out and you might sit down and chat with them. And anyway, I won't describe things explicitly, but a large central space implies this group activity, is what I'm trying to say. You can figure out the rest. If you can't figure out the rest, then well, I mean, good on you. Good on you for not being able to figure out the rest. Alright, so we have a central space for group activity. Let's go downstairs first, because there's a steam room down here, which is even more interesting. Look at this. So we come down here. You'll notice there's no wallpaper and wood anymore. Everything's just concrete and stone, because baths. There's even baths in the basement. Like, why would you have a bath in the basement? What building except for a brothel would have a bath in the basement? A bathhouse would have a bath in the basement. So no, I can't think of anything. So this is a purpose-built brothel with a bath in the basement. And again, this is for wet activities. You can figure out the rest. It's for wet activities. Alright, good. And there's sauna rooms, presumably massages happen there on the bench, and there's other places for wet activities to occur, etc, etc. Alright, you can figure out the rest. Look at that. Oh, the pipes don't seem to fit. Maybe the pipes were added in later, because wouldn't that be closer to the ceiling if it was intended, or like if it was designed if it was designed to be a sauna from the outset, the pipes wouldn't be exposed like that, I don't think. So I think the steam equipment is retrofitted more recently. And here, like, you can see the electrical stuff is retrofitted onto the walls, right? Because, if the building was built with the electrical circuits at the same time, then the wires would be in the walls. They wouldn't be attached to the walls on the outside like this. So this is an older building where newer technology has been retrofitted onto it. So that's something. So it means the brothel has been here for a long time. I wonder how old the brothel is. There's no clear signs. There's no clear signs for how old it is. Although, there's cracks in the concrete and things like that. Several decades old, it would appear to be. At least several decades old. Maybe much more. But if it's well maintained, then you can't really tell. At least several decades old. Let's put it that way. Alright, so there's a bath and a sauna downstairs, and as we continue to walk upstairs, we have plants on the inside too. I don't know how they maintain. I mean, this is so extravagant compared to the rest of the city. It must take so much money to maintain. Alright, so there's more of these chairs for public activities if you're into that sort of thing, and also more bedrooms, because you need more than one bedroom in this sort of business. Alright, that's great. Fewer chairs out here. So the top floor is mostly bedrooms, although a few balconies if you're into outdoors things. So one bedroom back there, another bedroom over here. Well, I mean, there's no beds, but there are couches. Not that many private rooms. Not that many private rooms, and I'm just thinking, I mean, there could be a number of explanations. Oh, look, there's a harp here. And another couch. Alright, so, what can we say about the lack of private rooms? There are a few explanations. One explanation is, it's because it's a video game. And architecture in video games often are truncated and shrunk down. And so they're not as big as they would be in real life. That's one explanation. Another explanation is that they don't need a lot of bedrooms because people are comfortable with group activity in the brothel. That's a different explanation. Or a third explanation is that people are so fast in their activities that they don't take up a lot of space for a very long time, and so they go in, they're done, they come out, and the room is freed up for other clients. So, I mean, I don't know if you can think of any other possible explanations. I'm not entirely sure which one is true, and I'm not entirely sure if the game designers have really thought this through either. But the lack of, like, the small number of rooms implies that rooms are not needed, which means either people are into group activity or they're just really fast. Right? Right. Things to think about, or not, as the case may be, if you don't want to think about it. So now we are under the dome. Look how interesting this stuff is. Like, all the details. That's Art Nouveau. I guess this stuff is also Art Nouveau. Look how extravagant this stuff is. And in stark contrast to the rest of the city as well. And definitely in stark contrast to the Church of the Everyman, or the Office of the Overseer. Like, that is very austere, right? And at least in public, they are very proper and austere, whereas this is extravagant and sumptuous, I guess is the word to describe this stuff. The fact that this brothel can coexist with the Church of the Everyman is a little bit suspect. I'm not sure how that works. I'm not sure why. Well, we do know why, because in private, the High Overseer also enjoys courtesans in his spare time. Alright, I guess there's a lot of hypocrisy. That probably is the way to sum it up. Hypocrisy in this society. Alright, so let's go to the service areas. So the public areas are, as we say, very extravagant and appears to be rich and sumptuous. If we come back here, this is personnel only. So the staff area, immediately we can see there's a lot less wallpaper and a lot less gilding and a lot less Art Nouveau. It's this is more in line with the rest of the city. So we have showers, but not the baths for the clients. This is the showers for the staff. Oh wait, I haven't opened this door yet. What is this? Oh, loot. Oh, this is a toilet. That is a I would say that is an inadequate toilet. But there you go. I mean, there's showers, there's a little bit of decoration. But the staff areas, as you can see, is more utilitarian and less luxurious. And then if we go upstairs, we have office space. Again, the offices is pretty bare bones. Like the furniture, the tables and chairs, very bare bones. And we can continue to go up. I think this is the madam's chamber. Slightly fancier, with some paintings on the walls, with a fireplace. That's nice, but still very Spartan, right? It's like the bed it's just a metal frame bed, so it's pretty utilitarian. The chairs are utilitarian as well. Table's not very interesting, so it's slightly better than where the courtesans take care of themselves, but nowhere near as luxurious as the public space. And then on the top floor, in the attic, we have sleeping areas, presumably for the courtesans. And this is in line with the rest of the city now. So we can conclude that the courtesans themselves are not actually wealthy. There's a bit of red curtain here, but not much else. So all the appearance of luxury does not translate to the private lives of the prostitutes who work in this brothel. The private lives of the prostitutes who work in the brothel is pretty ordinary. In fact, probably less good than ordinary. whereas the public face of the brothel is significantly more luxurious. Alright, so that is, I think, all I have to say about the Golden Cat. I mean, there's a few other rooms back here. I guess this is another room where you can engage in activities if you want to. Another balcony back here. We can climb up to the roof. I'm not sure if there's anything useful about that. This does look a lot like a church. I mean, the layout of it is like a church, because churches usually have a cross plan, and this building does kind of have a cross plan. Kind of. Not strictly, but close. So we can see closer here, oh, we have metal roofing too. So the sheet metal roofing and the domes and domes. This is, yeah, it's Byzantine. Byzantine in inspiration. But the Byzantines didn't use this sort of thing for brothels. They didn't. They used this sort of thing for churches. So back to our original point, that this is a classic example of exoticism. In fact, maybe I should just let's go back to the front door. Maybe I should look up and find a definition of exoticism. Let me come back here. Alright, here it is. We're back where we started. So what is exoticism? Oh, there you go. Look, again, like Westerners imagining Middle Eastern harems with a lot of naked women lounging around. And look, there's baths and naked women. So this is the sort of fantasy, right? This is the sort of fantasy about other cultures, which is I mean, there's a dude there, so that's reverse exoticism. Okay, so let's look up a definition. Exoticism, Wikipedia, or in music. I don't want it to be in music. Exoticism is a trend in European art and design influenced by some ethnic groups or civilizations from the late 19th century. First stimulated by Eastern trade in the 16th and 17th centuries, interest in non-Western art by Europeans became more and more popular following European colonialism. So-called Oriental art emanated from a type of primitive fantasy for Western society, reflecting the increasingly exotic tastes of Europe. So that pretty much sums up. So when the Europeans expanded, like explored other parts of the world and colonized other parts of the world, they brought back ideas and stories from these other parts of the world, and they used it to fuel their own fantasies, not to actually understand these other cultures, but as a fuel for their own fantasies. And that is the definition of exoticism. And although we refer to Europeans doing this to other cultures in that definition, it's perfectly possible for every culture to exoticize any other culture, right? Like Chinese people can exoticize white people. That we can do that. And Africans can exoticize Japanese people. Like, but with any culture where you don't bother to really understand them, but only borrow bits and pieces and then use it to fuel your own fantasies, like any culture can do it to any other culture. And in this setting, in Dishonored, it appears that the people of Dunwall use it to fuel their fantasies, combining what we call Byzantine architecture with a brothel. Although, in this world, Byzantium is not in this world. So where this architecture came from in this world, we don't know because we only see Dunwall in this game. So whatever other part of the world that invented this architecture, it might be a completely different thing in this game, right? So I mean, the game is kind of based on reality, or it takes inspiration from reality, but the entire world and the entire geography and the entire culture is fictional. So again, we need to kind of separate in our minds the inspiration, the story, and the reality. Like, these are all separate things. Alright, so I think we're gonna end the video here. I'll see you in the next one.